dogs. We had a contest about who had the biggest blisters and who was the redder and lumpier. I won 3 cigarettes. Then we bet on who could last the longest without scratching, and I lost 3 cigarettes. At the rest station, I got scrubbed with soap by a pretty nurse for 15 minutes to knock off the crusts and scabs. Then it was a soak in a warm bath for 20 minutes before another scrubbing to get the little blighters to leave their burrows under my skin. A bit like bombing Fritz to get him out of his trenches. The nurse was stronger than she looked and wielded that scrubbing brush like mum scrubbing the floor. Then we got covered in a smelly yellow paste of sulphur and petrol. We were given clean clothes and got sent off with nothing to do but sit and wait for the next treatment. Every couple of days we'd get covered in the smelly yellow paste after a scrub and a warm bath. According to Nurse Arlington, the scabies rest station was set up because too many men with scabies were taking up the hospital beds. She reckons there's more scabies, infections, lice and skin problems being treated than anything else, including gunshot wounds. The biggest problem here is boredom and feeling useless. I've been here over a week. I'm glad to be leaving tomorrow. Some men have to stay for a month before getting rid of the blighters. The mood here is pretty low. A couple of days after we got here, we heard the 46th was part of another major stunt that didn't go too well. The talk was it was another useless stunt with big losses. We also heard Fritz bombed our supply lines and whole teams with drivers were killed. Men, wagons, horses and mules all blown to bits. We don't know who got hit, and me and Slim were pretty worried. I was real glad when Dixon came to see me and told me that poor devils that got hit weren't from the 46th or even the 12th Brigade. Thank God it wasn't our squatters transport team. Titch, the squatter, Frank, Joe Blue and the rest are all okay. It sounds heartless, but I'm glad it was another team that lost. That's what war does to you. That stunt was no good. Too many dead. Too many from our 46 as well as too many from other units. Dixon was pretty angry when he told me about it. Said our 12th Brigade was almost wiped out. Good men sent to death by idiot officers who just don't care. Said they were coming back from the front line on Easter Sunday night where they'd been for 3 days and thought they were going to get a rest. Instead, they got ordered to attack the Hindenburg line next morning. Poor beggars are already exhausted, but they picked up extra ammo, turned and marched the 5 miles back through the snow. Dixon said he was lucky. He was headed back with them when he was told he'd been detached from the 46th and had to report to one of the 12th Brigade's light trench mortar batteries. Batteries usually cop a lot of attention from Fritz, but he said he's driving the mule carts and moving guns and shells. Dixon reckons this stunt was even more rushed and foolhardy than usual. There's no real planning, not even a barrage to protect the lads. Before any attack, we do a huge bombardment of Fritz's line to soften him up, cut the wire and give cover to the infantry, but not this time. This time they were sent in with a new weapon called a tank that was supposed to protect them. I saw one a while back, and they're hard to describe. They're huge and ugly, nearly as big as a small house and all covered in metal sheets. They're a funny shape, sort of like a rectangle or a misshaped sideways diamond with a sloping sort of rounded front and back. They don't have wheels, but run on a track on each side of them made of metal plates, and they rumble along making a heck of a noise. There are little holes for the crew inside to look out, but it doesn't look like they can see too much. The one I saw had a 6-pounder, but Dixon reckons some had machine guns. They look like nothing can stop them. No trench, no bullet, no shell hole, no wire, nothing. But they're bloody useless. Didn't even show up when they were supposed to. The lads were sent back to the lines at dawn after lying out in the jump-off lines in the freezing cold snow all night waiting for them. Only just had a chance to warm up and got sent out again for another go that night. Dixon reckons the tanks are about as handy as a chocolate teapot, worse than useless in a battle. They were supposed to cut the wire and take the trenches, and then our lads would follow them in. That didn't happen. They broke down or turned up late. They were so slow, the lads could walk faster going backwards. All they did was shoot our lads and draw Fritz's fire on them. Anyone near them was killed. And they're not bulletproof either. One driver had his head blown off when a shell went straight through one end and out the other at the tank. Poor Dixon's voice cracked as he struggled to tell me how he watched the lads moving forward from the jump-off line under machine gun fire without artillery support. Then he watched as they dropped like flies in the snow. Some made it through and reached the wire, only to get caught up in it, and the Huns poured even more fire into them. The sky was filled with smoke and screams, and he could see sparks as the bullets hit the wire. Watching is worse than being in it. When you're in it, you think about what's in front of you and just getting through, but watching and not being able to do anything is cruel. Dixon was stunned that a few men actually got through the bullets and wire and then disappeared into Fritz's trenches. I can still hear frustration in his voice when he said he saw SOS flares go up everywhere and saw shells and bombs exploding around them. Dixon said he was busy getting mortars in, but they weren't allowed to fire them where they wanted to in case they hit a tank or our men. He said a couple of hours later, he was dumbfounded to see some of our men come back out through the wire, walking tall, ignoring bullets, helping others, and carrying the machine guns over their shoulders as if they were coming back from a big night out. Poor stretcher bearers were almost done for by the numbers of dead and wounded. No way could they get to them all. Dixon said everyone that could helped. They worked as fast as they could under fire. They tried to block out so many cries and screams for help and just pick one and follow it to the poor soul crying out. Dixon said he'd get to someone in a bad way and get told, "No mate, don't worry about me. You go get Tom or Frank or Jack over there." His words. He said he found 3 men in a shell hole but couldn't tell which bits belonged to which body. He was about to move on when he heard something under them. Turned out to be young Blue Smith. Dixon was real pleased to get him out. Dixon said the sight back behind the lines was pitiful. They were wounded everywhere, the men lying all over the place in the snow and the muck, too exhausted to care. Others were walking around in a daze, looking for what was left of their companies and their mates. Some were crying in despair and frustration at the enormous loss, being sent in without support and doomed from the start. The lads reckon hell will freeze over before they ever fight the tank again. I can't believe that so many of them have gone. Good men, solid men, mates. How can they just throw away our lives like that? For nothing. I will never understand war. I'll be going back to the unit tomorrow and we're glad to get back. I dread finding out who's not there. I'm being called for my last treatment, so I best sign off. Love to all, your loving son, Elvie. So that's just one of the letters. So that's the style of the letters, and then you've got the third part person narration. If you've got time or want to hear a bit of that part, I'm happy to read. That battle was about Bullecourt, so this is actually what he was talking about, which you can tell I get a bit upset when okay, starts off, but General Gough's plan to take Bullecourt and the area of the Hindenburg line between Bullecourt and Queant was for the tanks to sneak up on the German lines in a surprise attack. The tanks would crush the wire and enter the front line, allowing the following infantry to sweep through and occupy it. An artillery barrage would then commence on the Germans who were further back behind their line. Once the infantry was in, a passage would be opened up for the cavalry to charge through. Gough, like Haig, was a cavalryman, and nearly all his battle plans saw cavalry dashing through gaps made by infantry and overwhelming the enemy with swords held high. This further confirmed how little he knew about the battleground they were fighting on, contemporary warfare, or the use of machine guns, artillery, aviation, and barbed wire. General Gough planned to use 2 Australian brigades to spearhead the Bullecourt area of his attack and chose the 4th Division's 4th and 12th Brigades. They were regarded as having some of the finest troops in the AIF. With obscene haste, he declared they would attack the Hindenburg line the following morning, with no time to prepare and without adequate artillery support or the usual preliminary bombardments, just tanks. At 4 p.m. on 9th of April 1917, the commanders were told they would be attacking the Hindenburg line at dawn the following morning. The Charles had already reported that the wire in front of the trenches was intact and that the trenches were full of Germans, experienced ones at that. General Gough was unperturbed. He informed the commanders that the concentration of the 12 tanks would be enough. The tanks would break down the fields of barbed wire and smash the machine gun nests in front of the lines. There was no need for an extensive artillery. The 46th Battalion would be the lead attack for the 12th Brigade on the left of Bullecourt, with the 4th Brigade 16th Battalion the lead to their right. The 48th and 13th Battalions would follow in support. Inexplicably, the plan included a large gap between the 2 attacking battalions. In addition to breaking down the wire in front of the trenches, the tanks were responsible for protecting the 46th flank from enemy artillery and the guns in Bullecourt. The tank would also move into the gap between the 2 battalions and protect the 46th flank and the 16th right flank and their 16th left flank. The commanders were told that the tanks would do all the work. The infantry would simply follow the tanks across the cut German wire and into the trenches. They would be there merely as a mopping up force. The fact that the tanks were still experimental, the Australians had never worked with tanks, and there would be no communication between them and the tank crews appeared irrelevant. Australian commanders expressed their significant concern and pointed out the flaws in the sanity of the plan. They made multiple requests to General Gough to postpone the attack to allow for proper preparation, but in typical Gough fashion, he refused. The attack would go ahead as planned. The next morning, 10th of April 1917, the men of the Australian 4th and 12th Brigades, including those of the 46th Battalion, marched 8 kilometres through the snow and then lay prone in the dark khaki uniforms in the white snow. Shivering in the rain and sleet in front of the German lines, they waited for the tanks, ticking down the minutes until jump-off time. The time came, no tanks. The time went, no tanks. Dawn came, no tanks. The tanks were stuck in a snowstorm. The attack was postponed and the men had to crawl back to their lines under German observation in daylight. The half-frozen men were not happy. Their opinion of being led by incompetence was further confirmed when they were ordered to attack the following morning. So once again, on the 11th of April, the men lay out in the snow waiting at the jump-off line. Felt a bit like deja vu, except it got worse. As in any attack, the timing is crucial. The tanks were to leave the jump-off line at 4:30 a.m. and reach the Hindenburg line at 4:45 a.m. The 46th Battalion was to follow the tanks and take the first line of the trenches at Bullecourt village. Then the 48th would leapfrog them to take the second line of trenches. The 46th had been ordered not to leave the jump-off line until 15 minutes after the tanks had passed by them. In the frenzy of planning, this order was subtly changed during the night, and the new order sent to the battalions was to give the tanks 15 minutes and then go at 4:45 a.m. with or without the tanks, but no one told the 46th. The jump-off time approached and the 46th waited. Jump-off time passed, and still they waited. And again they asked, where are the tanks? The tanks played a critical role and was essential for the success of the attack. But where were they? Under a German barrage and with machine gun bullets whistling over their heads, 46 lay in the snow after the jump-off time, watching the sky lighten and waited. Finally, the men heard a tank coming, at last. But wait, what? It's firing on them. After much cursing and waving at the tank, the driver popped his head out and queried, well, if you're not the Germans, then where are they? After being told in the politest possible terms, he rumbled off and was hit by a shell. Another tank lumbered up, crossed the jump-off line, broke down and became a great target for the Germans, together with the hapless Australians caught near it. With the dawn lighting the sky, the 46th were finally told to wait no longer, but go now. However, precious time had been lost and the German defence was now in full swing. Just 3 of the promised 12 tanks had arrived and lined up at the correct time as planned. 2 of those were disabled shortly after reaching the jump-off line, drawing heavy fire of the men nearby. The third made it part way to the Hindenburg line before stopping, tangled in the wire. It became another great target, while also making it impossible for the men to squeeze past. Other tanks turned up, but late. One never left the workshop, some broke down before getting to the start position, others got hit on the way to it, and one got lost and ended up in a mine crater in Bullecourt. Needless to say, there was no tank in the gap between the 46th and the 16th Battalions to protect their flanks, nor had the tanks cut the wire. The Germans had a field day mowing down Australians. The Australians were hesitant to use artillery on the German guns in Bullecourt for fear they would hit the tank that was stuck in the crater in Bullecourt. So the Germans continued firing with devastating effects on the men of the 46th. To further highlight the flaws in planning, or lack of, the Germans were not supposed to know what was happening. It was supposed to be a surprise. But thanks to the fiasco the night before, the Germans knew something was up. Then the noise of the tanks sneaking up on them, which could hardly be missed, alerted them to when the tank attack was coming, and they were more than ready. Tank carcasses lay about the battlefield like large motionless slugs, blackened and burning on the white snow. To the horror of the crews inside, they discovered that the tanks were not bulletproof, and it took far less than a direct hit to stop them. Another delusion was the supposed speed of the tanks. According to the plan, the men of the 16th Battalion waited on the jump-off line for the tank that was to protect them and lead them to the front. But when it arrived, as the commander told them there was no way any tank could reach that line in 15 minutes allotted in the plan. They were just not capable of that speed. So the tanks lagged behind the troops and fired on them instead. The concentrated tank attack to protect the troops and pave the way through the wire for the diggers to mop up was over before it began. Of the 12 tanks that were pivotal to the success of this en masse tank attack, not one reached the Hindenburg line. Nor did any tank provide the promised protection on the flanks of the 46th and 16th from a murderous fire or complete the essential task of breaking down the wire so the infantry could cross. Diggers were either mown down trying to reach the wire or strung up on it, like meat displayed in a butcher shop. One could say the tanks and the experiment had failed miserably. Yet incredibly, through sheer guts and determination, the Australians did what could not be done. Some of them got through the fields of barbed wire and broke into both lines of the German trenches. They did it without tanks, under fire from three sides and enduring savage counterattacks. They became the only soldiers to see the other side of the impenetrable Hindenburg line. Breaking into the German trenches, they fought the Germans in hand-to-hand combat with bayonets and bombs. Fighting like demons possessed, they captured 2 lines of German trenches and held on, repulsing merciless counterattack after counterattack. But they needed help, and they needed it now. They sent SOS pleas for artillery assistance, for more ammunition, for relief, or anything at all. One after another, flares lit up the sky. In desperation, one company alone set up 17 flares begging for assistance. All were ignored. No help came. Their ammunition was exhausted, and without the support they were screaming for, the few men left couldn't hold on. They had no choice but to withdraw back to their lines, back through the wire and the murderous machine gun fire, past their mates hanging on the wire or wounded or lying dead in the shell holes. By 11:45 a.m, through no lack of their own individual courage and bravery, the area taken by the Australians was back in German hands. Not surprisingly, the cavalry was stood down. Wednesday, the 11th of April 1917, is another day in the history of the murderous, bloody-minded, wasteful slaughter of Australians. This stunt, lasting around 7 hours, saw a loss of almost 3,300 men of the 4th Division. Around 80% of those that went in became casualties. 387 men from the 46th Battalion didn't come back. For all ranks in the Australians, any confidence in tanks was completely shattered. The bitterness and disgust at being used ran deep. As far as the Australian battalion commanders were concerned, not only did the tanks fail, but they were the cause of the frightful number of casualties. In their opinion, without the tanks, they could have taken and held the line, but they didn't lay the blame for the losses solely on the tanks. The real accountability and the moral responsibility for the callous, useless sacrifice of some of the best fighting troops in not only AIF, but the entire British Army lay at the feet of General Gough. Gough's childish impetuosity has resulted in the 4th AIF divisions being thrown away in an experiment of lethal stupidity despite repeated warnings. The experiment failed so dismally that it was used by British instructors at officer training school for the rest of the war as an example of how not to undertake an attack. The Australians did, however, gain something from the Bloody Fiasco. They gained a sense of pride in knowing that they could face any challenge put to them with determination, daring and bravery. And in the process, they also gained a deepened respect from both sides of the trenches. Sadly, what highlights the absolute tragedy of this battle is that it is known as First Bullecourt, which meant they had to go through it again in Second Bullecourt. General Gough waited a few weeks before launching Second Bullecourt over the same ground, with the same recklessness. This time, having already decimated the 4th Australian Division, he used the 1st, 2nd and 5th Australian Divisions. Men of these divisions would be reminded of the 4th as they stepped on and over their corpses and around their bodies still hanging on the wires. At Second Bullecourt, a further 7,000 Australians were lost to General Gough's insatiable capacity for murderous recklessness, all for the gain of a few kilometres that the Germans retook from the British in March 1918, requiring the 3rd Battle of Bullecourt. So Albert was really lucky a couple of times. That the dose of scabies that he's got kept him out of that battle, which was, and another battle that he also was crooking. He didn't get to be in either because he was also a crook. So him being crook a couple of times worked out rather well for him. So yeah, but that's part of it. There's lots of different bits and pieces in it that you'll find of interest. I know myself when I was doing the research, I'd find out things and I'd go, really? How could they do that? So off I'd go on another rabbit hole and end up there, hence Manfred von Wittkofen and why he was buried 4 times. I didn't know, no one's buried 4 times. Read the book and you'll find out. Buy the book and then it's a bit better buy it. No borrowing or buying. I can't really get off this stage without thanking specifically a few people for actually making this whole thing happen. The people, even just for today, Laura in particular, Neil, Graham and Hazel, and Bobby down the back with his video, and also Bonnie. She's handmade the Anzac biscuits. You'll have to check them out, so thank you for that, Bonnie. But in appreciation, I just wanted to give a couple of, that one. That one. there's some local produce in there, and that's a peace plant. I thought it was pretty apt. Peace plant, you know, peace plant health. Neil, thank you very much for your talk, and also for you stepping in at the last minute and helping us with that as well. Thank you very much. I do appreciate your time. And thank you all for coming. Look, this is really good because it's a bit like having a funeral without dying. All these people. I'm really quite slow, but there's people from work, people from all over the place. Oh, and of course Sylvie's here, and Delita. No publisher, no editor, no book. And honest to God, if anyone ever wanted to publish a book, you could not go past Sylvie. She was absolutely the best thing about. She's just been absolutely brilliant. Delita with her editing. Her and I had a few discussions on commas. Men, I do not like commas. Delita does, I don't. And but I just want to thank everybody for coming. It's been really, really great. Laura, you're supposed to take over again now, but I'll just keep going if you like. If you want to purchase the book, please. When you purchase the book, you can't let that back door actually without purchasing one. We didn't, you know, but there's cash or the little square costing you can use. You can buy. Laura will be in charge of the cash, and Bobby will be in charge of the FSPOS, and then I'm happy to sign anyone that that wants them. So, well, good. Thank you all so much for coming.